So, Larry and parts of Larry. When I look at Larry, it looks an awful lot like a plant to me. How do plants work? Well, you have the roots, stem, leads to often some flower, which gives off pollen. The roots are what the plant uses to bring in what it needs, nutrients, and so on. Goes up the stem, and poof, we spray out pollen. The roots, if you will, are the structures that bring in signals, are the dendrites. These are the dendrites. This is the soma. The soma is the cell body. It houses the nucleus and internal structures of the cell. This is the main command center. This is where summation happens. So the inputs come from the dendrites mostly. They're added up, the excitatory inputs and the inhibitory inputs. And if you have sufficient excitation, just like we talked about in the last video, then you will generate an action potential. That action potential is generated at this zone here called the axon hillock. So if there's enough excitation as a result of the summation process, then we generate an action potential. That action potential is generated at the hillock. It looks something like this. And then it rapidly shoots down the axon. This is the axon, the long arm of the neuron. The axon goes and is reaching for other neurons to communicate with. Where the axon begins to break up, we call these the axon terminals. And at the very tip of the terminal, you have this little button, axon terminal button. I know it looks like buttons, just button. These butons are where neurotransmitters are stored, waiting for the action potential to come on down and cause these neurotransmitters to be released. So again, dendrites take in information. The soma is where it's all computed. If there's enough excitation, we generate an action potential at the hillock. And it runs down the axon towards the terminals, towards the axon terminal button, where neurotransmitters get sprayed out. The last piece we haven't talked about here is the myelin sheath. Myelin sheath, they always look like bubble wrap or hot dogs on, or like kebabs. Kebab. Sorry. The myelin is essentially cholesterol, fatty substance that wraps around your axon and protects it. So there's protection. The myelin also insulates. Remember that electrical signal is going down the wire. You don't want that signal escaping out. 3. Myelinated axons are about 150 times faster. Faster at what? Faster at conducting the action potential. We know this because not all axons are myelinated. And when you compare, myelinated ones are significantly faster. Now we know all this We know all this from basic research, but we also can see the benefit of myelin when we examine MS. This is multiple sclerosis. MS is an autoimmune disease. Auto, self, immune, the immune system. Where the immune system, in the case of MS, attacks the myelin, destroys the myelin. So your axons are left bare and vulnerable to injury. What you get in MS is muscle weakness. Now, why would you get muscle weakness? Here's my stick man. Well, your brain is sending down a signal, hey, move your foot. But that signal has to come down via axons. If the axons are damaged at any point, the signal will have trouble reaching the toe, if that's where you're going. Similarly, if you talk about sensation, so touch. If I tickle the foot, the signal has to climb up the leg, up the spinal cord, into the brain, all via axons. Again, if there's injury at any point, the signal may not reach its destination. This is numbness and paralysis. We'll talk more about MS later when we talk about the glial cells.